Just here on Tan Talk 1340.
That's right. Several of us in the studio today are in the Tan Talk Radio Network. Atheists, real live atheists, those of us who think religion is probably the most detrimental disease ever to affect the human family. It has kept progress arrested for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. We hope we'll get over it in our lifetimes, probably not, but we're going to do everything we can to accelerate the process. Ed Golly with Judy Adkins, Jim Peterson, and the Tan Talk Radio Network on The Atheist Forum. And yes, we do invite your call at 441-3000. We're going to be talking with a representative of Planned Parenthood today on the program, who will explain to us some of the issues about sex education in the Pinellas County Public Schools. First, a quick message about an event that we have coming up next month. Jim?
Yes, we just wanted to let you know about the occurrence of International Darwin Day, which will be celebrated here in the Tampa Bay area on March 16th. Our guests this year are Hemant Mehta and Ryan Cragen, both well-known names and professors. And you may know Mr. Mehta better as the friendly atheist, and we like to call Dr. Cragen the personable professor. It will be at the Octagon of the Unitarian Universalists of Clearwater at 9:30, and the entry cost is just $20. Light refreshments will be served, and the event will last about 2.5 hours. So we will see you all there. I promise you will have an exciting and interesting time with new revelations, completely unexpected.
You don't need to sit in the seat for 2.5 hours, right?
You can occasionally get up and
multiple
down.
breaks.
That's right.
Good. Okay. Judy?
Okay. Thank you, Ed and Jim. As Ed said, today our guest is Nan Morgan from Planned Parenthood, and she's going to talk about the state of sex education in Florida, not just Pinellas County Public Schools. But you might be asking why atheists care about public schools, much less sex education. Everywhere we see Christian nationalists trying hard to gain increasing influence in our school system. This clearly violates state and church separation. In addition, some of the course materials is clearly not based on science and facts and leans rather heavily on religious beliefs. AOF and this radio program fully supports a rigorous approach to all education, but like comparative religion, history, or science, the key value lies in truthful and objective narrative that seems to convey verifiable, useful information. We contacted the current provider of sex education in Pinellas County, the More to Life organization, which is part of the New Life Solutions Ministry, to participate, but they were not available today. We are working on having them on the air at a later time. I'd like to remind our audience that our guests or the organizations they represent are not affiliated with our organization and do not necessarily represent or share the same views and beliefs. So please give us a call, again, at 727-441-3000. But keep your questions on the topic of sex education today. Our guest is not here to discuss abortion or atheism, but education. About our guest, Ms. Morgan has been a dedicated employee of Planned Parenthood for more than 12 years. She currently serves as Senior Director of Education at Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida. She oversees outreach educators who partner with schools and other organizations to provide education and awareness of issues involving sexuality, sexual health, and reproductive health care from middle school-aged youth to adults. The organization's education department serves 22 counties in Florida, from Naples to Tampa to Orlando. Nan's team reached nearly 18,000 young people last year with topics that ranged from healthy relationships, safer sex, consent and boundaries, STDs, and birth control. So Nan, welcome, and let's talk about your experiences.
Thank you so much. Well, what questions can I answer for you about sex education?
Well, I guess one of my main, I know that Florida requires us to teach abstinence in the schools. And I'm wondering how effective you think the abstinence education program is.
Didn't work too well for Mary, did it? Oh, go ahead.
We know that comprehensive sex education is found to be the most effective in helping students have healthy decisions around sex and sexuality. And we also know that when they're not getting the comprehensive information, then they're looking elsewhere for that information. So when we think about things that are not based on fact or things that are very value-based, then it's leaving a lot of people out of the conversation and actually can increase risk of STDs and unplanned pregnancy.
Sorry, Jim, you had.
Yeah, it has to be especially difficult for young people in our hypersexualized society, at least in some ways at any rate, to have to deal with these vast social changes that we have, and also with their own internal changes that emerge from the process of puberty. How do young people cope? I'm well out of that range myself, but somewhat curious, especially when you consider the widespread existence of STDs and the concerns about teenage pregnancy.
Great question. You know, we know that parents and youth across the board support having comprehensive sex education and want this information. And unfortunately, what we're finding is many places it's not happening or it's very spotty and inconsistent. And so teens are now getting the majority of their information about sexual health online, and many times is not accurate. And so by failing to educate teens in school, we're forcing them to turn to inaccurate online information. And a study in the Journal of Adolescent Health found that 46% of sexual health websites had inaccurate information about contraception, and 35% had inaccurate information about other things as well related to sexual health.
If you were to recommend to a young person an online resource that they might consult, because the schools appear to have a less than adequate program in this regard, and we can discuss that too. But what website might you recommend?
So there are. I am going to plug Planned Parenthood, and not just because I work for the organization. It
Sure.
is really laid out in a wonderful format that meets the needs of all audiences. And so there is an actual drop down for teens, for parents, for educators, for people who want to become more involved. And it's done on a literacy level that everyone can understand. And it provides the information in a way that is judgment free and includes everyone in the conversation. So that's one way to get basic information around specifics like birth control methods and how effective they are, what are the potential symptoms and things that they help with, to different types of STDs and potential symptoms and treatments. And then there are some other available resources as well, that one that we've had for quite some time, which is a text chat. We want to meet people where they are, and especially young people. We know that more and more, younger and younger, they're having a phone and they're having access to the internet. And so this gives them the ability to text a question, whether it's, am I going through puberty? Whether it's, how do I know if I'm in love? Or when they're older, someone might ask a question around, how do I find a health center? How do I know what birth control method is right for me? All of these different things that people may ask, especially young people, they can text a question in, or they can chat online on our website. We also just launched a program called RU, and this is specifically designed for teens, and it gives them an ability through an algorithm to answer their most frequently asked questions. And if the way that they're asking the question, it doesn't populate the answers or give them additional resources and information, then they actually can click to chat with a live person.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that this is giving them medically accurate information and in a non-judgmental way, and meeting them where they are. Because while we try to provide education to everyone everywhere across our affiliates and countrywide, we understand and know that not everybody gets access to the education that we can provide, and there is barriers to getting that information.
Right.
So we want to
yeah.
make sure people have that information, especially at their fingertips.
Like Vice President Mike Pence would probably want to have you burned alive at the stake for doing something like this, because he thinks that it should all be abstinence only, just like former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin. We saw how well that worked with Bristol, right? The point of the question is, tell us about the opposition that you have to these progressive and educational ideas. There's got to be some very serious pushback from the conservatives and the religious right.
So there are people who don't feel that comprehensive sex education should be offered, but we know what the risks are to our young people when they don't get information. So teaching abstinence without teaching consent, for instance, actually puts kids at more risk for sexual assault.
Right.
And teaching kids to only have sexual contact without marriage won't stop predators from attempting sexual assault. So teaching kids consent will enable them to recognize what they're experiencing. And it's not just around sexual assault, it's around also friendships and relationships. So when we talk about consent, we're talking about how to stand up for themselves in lots of different situations and experiences. So while we do talk about relationships they may have, romantic relationships, it also includes friendships. A lot of the same issues and concerns and situations that may put young people at risk, not just sexually, but otherwise. Being able to say no to drinking, being able to say no to someone who is putting them in an unsafe situation. All of those things are interconnected. And so by giving them the skills and the words and being able to communicate in interactive spaces that give them that opportunity, we're helping to create a healthier community.
One of my concerns is I know that I think it's like nearly half of the 20 million new cases of STDs or STIs each year. And I wish we had more current statistics, but the one I'm looking at said that in 2014, 16% of the reported new HIV infections were from individuals under the age of 25. So I think that that's another area that they need the facts and not just say no, because obviously that doesn't work. We still have 59% of all pregnancies in Florida are described as unintended.
Whoa.
So now that's not all teens, that's just in general. And but that we have the 29th highest birth rate among women between the ages of 15 and 19 in the U.S. So, if abstinence only worked, and I think we would see better results, because I know they've been doing the abstinence only education for quite some time. I don't know exactly when it was started. I apologize for that.
Well, and it's gone back and forth with sometimes getting large amounts of funding, then smaller amounts, and then larger amounts. And it depends many times with what's happening on a federal, state, and local level with different funding streams. We know, though, that sex education is supported by numerous prestigious health and medical organizations, including the American Medical Association,
Right.
Academy of Pediatrics, Adolescent Health and Medicine. They all know and support through research the evidence on why this is important and why our young people should have all of the information. Just like the information we provide around other health topics, this is an important part of living a healthy life throughout their lives.
Yeah,
And also being able to, go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. Go ahead.
All right, then I'll go
Well,
ahead.
and
If you
and
just
to have
joined
hope.
us recently, just a moment, Nan, please. You're listening to the Atheist Forum on the Tan Talk Radio Network, and we're speaking with Nan Morgan from Planned Parenthood. We invite you to call in if you'd like to comment, ask Nan a question, or insult an atheist at 441-3000. My question is, though, what influence can Planned Parenthood have on the curricula in the Pinellas County school system? Because you're not really a government agency, isn't that right?
Well, we can definitely help support anyone who would like more information on specific curriculum, specific research, if they would like us to consult on what has been proven to be effective, how to teach youth and meet them where they are. Those are things that we're very well versed in. So while we reach a certain percentage of people within our state, we are the nation's leaders in sex education. And so we have a wealth of information that we can bring. We also, not just within Pinellas, but speaking more across the affiliate, many times sit at different community tables where we have conversations on best practices and how we can help support other organizations and professionals who are working with young people.
And what is the source of your funding, or at least the primary source?
So it is generally from community foundations and small grants and donors and people who care about supporting the education that we provide.
So I know that the abstinence only until marriage program has been funded quite significantly by the taxpayers. Do they include anything on consent, or do you know if they can include anything on consent in their educational approach? Sorry, I've got a cold.
Many times,
Non-contagious.
so I cannot speak to one particular curriculum,
Right.
but across the board, they do not speak to consent, and they do not speak to when someone is sexually active, what do they do?
Yeah.
They also leave out the LGBTQ community.
Yes, they do.
Very important that we include everyone in the conversation. We know we're going to have the healthiest community possible. We also know that when you leave people out, there's risk for people not getting the information and care that they need and feeling stigmatized. And sexuality is one of those spaces where many people feel uncomfortable or lack the knowledge and information to make those choices. But we know that it's overwhelmingly, I know we hear a lot of people that sometimes speak very loudly and say that they do not want sex education, but overwhelming numbers of parents and community members across the country and in our state want this information, and many think that their young people are getting it,
Right.
and they're not.
Nan, could you briefly explain what you mean by the term consent?
Yes, that's
How it's
was going to
used
be
in
my
this.
question too.
So consent can mean a lot of things, but when we're talking about consent, we're talking about when someone is able to say what they're okay or not okay to do. And again, at Planned Parenthood, we speak specifically to relationships, but we also speak more broadly to friendships as well. So anyone we're interacting with, because if we're not giving young people the tools on how to communicate when it comes to, again, let's say someone putting them in a risky situation, someone getting in a car with someone and they feel it's unsafe. We know that if we're talking about someone being able to communicate that this doesn't feel right to them, to be able to use their words and use their words effectively. And then that translates also when someone is in an intimate relationship with someone. So being able to say that they don't want to do whatever that something is if they don't feel comfortable, or that they can say that they would like to stop, and to be able to understand that not only nonverbal communication, but verbal communication has to be used. And so all of those pieces that are connected, as well as the boundaries piece. And again, that is very specific to intimate relationships, but it also speaks more broadly to boundaries across someone's life. Again, in all areas when they're interacting with other people.
And especially this concerns the nature of risk. I mean, and an individual, especially a young person, has to weigh some of these circumstances and understand what the potential risks are. and without the information that you speak of, it's difficult for them. And especially in an educational environment where the only prescription is an absolute, what am I trying to say? What's the policy when we're referring to?
Abstinence.
Abstinence. It does not make the heart grow fonder.
One of my concerns too is I know in the, I looked up the statute on teaching sex education in schools, and they are not restricted just to abstinence, but some, I think 2 counties in Florida, Pinellas being one of them and Santa Rosa being the other, have chosen providers for sex education that are advocates of abstinence only. But it also, like you said, leaves out LGBTQ people because the statute says that they have to promote the norm of monogamous heterosexual marriage. And I just find that so ridiculous in this day and age, since we recognize marriage equality now. But I am concerned about the increase in HIV among I understand Florida has a very high rate of new HIV infections, and how miseducation is being putting everyone at risk for sexually transmitted diseases.
Yes, one of the things is that when you aren't providing education around safer sex, which of course abstinence should always be a part of a healthy choice that an individual can make. But when they're not given all the information and education around what they can do to be safer, that's when we see STD rates go up. And when they're not being provided information on HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases, infections, we know that it goes up, because when I was younger, a lot of people we weren't quite sure where HIV was being contracted and how, and then they found out very quickly. And now people see it as a chronic illness.
Right.
And it is a chronic illness, but it's very serious.
Yes,
so
it is.
Sometimes young people are not seeing it. And I think when it comes to STDs, not having the information or having misinformation, many people, and not just teens, but adults as well, think, well, it's not going to happen to me. It happens to someone else. And because we still stigmatize people who have an STD, whether it's curable or not curable, it's somebody else. And we need to get to a place where it's everybody.
Right.
That while we all have these special things that we bring to our relationships, our friendships, our community, we are no different. We are not special and unique when it comes to becoming infected with an STD.
Right.
Well, I'd like to ask you, what do you see as the future for Planned Parenthood, given the strenuous resistance to your existence by the conservatives in this country and the religious right? Because to me, you're the personification of the abortion movement in this country, even though I realize it's a very small percentages of the services that Planned Parenthood does engage in. But I see this endless movement underway in this country to essentially regulate Planned Parenthood out of business. I don't know. Are you at liberty to talk about that with us today, real quickly?
So that's something that I can't speak to directly to give you context, but what I can tell you and what I see across the affiliate is support from people everywhere and anywhere that say, thank you for what you do. Thank you for providing education, either it's to the young people in their life, to them when they were younger and needed Planned Parenthood, and constantly getting people who share those types of stories with me and with the education team. And so while I know that there is a loud minority that sometimes feels larger than life, most people are very much behind the work that we do, especially around sex education. They understand the importance, the value, the significance for the health and well-being of the young people who are our future, and want young people to be able to provide that information and empower their families if and when they decide to have families in the future.
Well, I know you can't stay with us for the whole hour. Can you give us maybe five more minutes? One or two more
Sure.
questions? Okay.
Sure.
Then, what can we do to get the school board to move away from the religiously oriented program it apparently presently has, and move off into a more scientifically based program that would provide genuine help to the students?
Well, one thing people can do is if they have a young person in a school, so if it's a parent, a grandparent, a family member, they can actually contact the school that their children go to and ask what is being provided. They actually can ask for the curriculum, for a copy of the curriculum, and ask in the particular classes that their child or children are in, what's being provided. That's one space, because then it lets the schools and the school board know that there are people within the community that really care about the education that their young people are receiving. The other is finding out when there are community coalition meetings that are advocating for comprehensive sex education in the community. And there are a number of groups in Pinellas that are trying to uplift this issue because they have young people or care about what young people are receiving and want to see them do a better job.
Mm-hmm. And indeed, that is a big problem in our society. We, those of us who have been around a little while, well remember the state of sex education back in the time when we were growing up, and it just didn't exist. We picked up what we thought we needed to know from the street, and usually it was neither accurate nor helpful. So,
What about charter schools? Do they have any interest in your assistance?
We will go to any school, any organization that would like our help, and we go, like I said, everywhere and anywhere. So any youth social serving agencies, we've gone to work with parents, we work with people in recovery, we work with incarcerated juveniles and adults, charter schools, public schools, you name it. We have an ask, and we try to meet the needs of all of the communities that we have educators in.
But are they? But you know, the way we look at it is that the charter schools tend to be very religious. They have a religion foundation, and that they seemingly would be less inclined to ask you. But what do you say?
Charter schools are not necessarily religious. They're mostly privately owned, although there's a move afoot to make them nonprofits, but some of them are profit motivated. Private schools tend to be more religious.
Right.
And you tend to not be interested in this kind of thing. But the charter schools are somewhere in between private and public schools. But I did want to, do we need to take our commercial?
No, it's okay. Let's ask one or two more questions, and we'll let Nan go, and then go ahead and do our stuff.
I don't know. I just noticed this week that Senator Berman filed a bill, Senate Bill 926. I don't know if you've become aware of that yet. Nan?
Can you speak to what the actual piece was for that?
Yes. It is the, my ink is running out on my printer. And it printed very lightly, so I'm having a little trouble reading it. But it is called the Florida Healthy Adolescent Act.
You know, I have not gotten information on that at this point. I would have to defer to one of the organizers on that.
Okay.
But I can get back to you on that.
Well, I can tell you that it appears to be an excellent bill, and in fact, I wrote Berman and thanked her for introducing this bill because it talks exactly about what we've talked about, providing using the American Medical Association information and the pediatrics and all those things, talking about providing real education, science-based, evidence-based education to people, to students, and comprehensive information. And that was one of my questions, because when we talk about sex education, do students think of this only as intercourse, or do they understand that it includes other sexual activities?
They understand that it includes other things, and I think that when people think of sex ed, it is definitely in this very narrow box,
Mm-hmm.
and it is so much more. You know, understanding your body, knowing the basic anatomy and reproductive system is the foundation for understanding how sexually transmitted diseases are spread,
Right.
how pregnancy occurs. And if you don't know those things, then all of the other things can be very mysterious or scary. And that's when a lot of these myths and misconceptions around sexuality happen. Teens are hearing information from other teens, and many times they don't have accurate information. We know that parents are the best educators,
Mm-hmm.
be the primary educators for young people. However, many times they don't have the tools and resources, and so they feel ill-equipped and don't have those conversations.
Right. I can attest to that, because my parents, I had zero conversations about sex ed when I was growing up. And of course, I'm much older, and that was a different time. But I was fortunate to have a little bit of sex education in public school. But it's very tricky, because you do want to give parents the I don't want to say control over their children, because they don't really need to have control over their children, but their primary responsibility for indoctrinating their children and how they expect them to live. But at the same time, some parents are not very good at that.
Right. I hear this urban legend that seems to imply that simply because someone's a parent, they're
Yes.
automatically an excellent parent, and they always know what's best for their kid. And we know better than that. Well, Nan, I want to thank you for being with us today, and give you an opportunity to tell our listeners anything you want about Planned Parenthood, how they can help your organization, support it. Anything you want to tell us, websites?
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Yes.
Yeah, so 1-800-230-PLAN is the number where if they need to make an appointment with us, and that would be for any of the services that we provide. We also have a website. It's myplannedparenthood.org. We also have a chat text that people can utilize, and then for young people, it's ROO, and they can go to the Planned Parenthood website or type that in, and they can ask questions and get responses to. So it's, we know, going to give them the information that they need, as well as if someone wants to volunteer with Planned Parenthood, if they want to find out how they can get involved, whether it be with our advocacy department, or whether it be helping to support our patients in different types of ways. We have lots of opportunities for volunteers on how they can get engaged. And so we'd love to hear from you. And they can also go to the 1-800-230-PLAN number, and it will direct them to our local call center, and we can give them more information and find out what they'd like to get involved with. And as always, we are a nonprofit, and if anyone would like to ensure that we're able to continue the services and expand the services that we provide across our affiliates, any donation is greatly appreciated.
You know, it's extraordinary that for such a simple thing, the act of sexual reproduction is so extraordinarily consequential. It affects matters religious, ethical, educational, across the board for everyone. And the entire society is largely shaped by the response that we have to our sexual impulses. So the work you do, I think, is very, very important, and we want you to have the very best kind of experience that you can offer to the students.
Well, I appreciate that, and know that when we are able to not only have parents, mentors, trusted adults be able to give accurate information to young people, and then be able to give continuous messaging from other groups, that's when we know that it will normalize and destigmatize this part of our life, which is a really important part, and help young people and our community live healthier lives.
And how long has Planned Parenthood been in existence?
Over 100 years
Wow,
now.
that's unbelievable. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and I hope our listeners got a lot out of your comments and your insight.
I would ask that if you have fundraisers or something else you would like us to announce on the program in the future, please let us know, and we'll be glad to promote Planned
Yeah, and
Parenthood.
we do have in Sarasota specifically coming up, we have our Sarasota event. So if anyone would like to come to that event, it's going to be great.
When is that?
That's March 7th.
Okay, so they can find that on your site, your website.
They
right?
can, and if they have
Okay.
any trouble, they can always contact our local number too by Googling their local call center, and it will connect them to find out more information. And our website would have it as well at the myplannedparenthood.org.
Great.
Well, thanks again, Nan
Thank you so
Morgan
much.
from Planned
Thank you
Parenthood.
indeed.
And Jim, you want to tell us a little bit about this event that we have coming up for the Darwin Day, which is next month. So since we're talking about events, we've got one for you
Yes,
also. And this is going to be in Clearwater. It's an annual event.
Yes,
Sure.
it's going to be on March 16th, and we're going to be. It's the Tampa Bay Coalition of Reason will be putting on this event, and it will feature Hemant Mehta and Dr. Ryan Cragen, and you can buy tickets by going to the website at
Yes, you got the right glasses.
yes. Pardon
Honestly,
me.
why didn't you just memorize it, Jim?
Yeah,
Jeez,
TampaBayCore.net. Go to TampaBayCor.net, and there you will find all the information you need, especially the fact that we're going to have light refreshments.
Oh.
So I'm sure that's an inducement enough.
All right, and what is it? It runs like a 10 to 2? or
It
something?
runs from 10 o'clock until 12:30, 1 o'clock or so.
Free parking?
Free parking.
No hecklers?
That alone. Well, I don't know about no
Okay.
hecklers. That remains to be seen. Actually, we rather like hecklers, especially
Okay.
for this program. So
All right.
call in.
We're going to take a moment and tell you about our local atheist organization called Atheists of Florida, and then we'll continue with the Atheist Forum here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Atheists of Florida is a nonprofit membership organization founded in 1992. For over 25 years, Atheists of Florida has brought atheists together to address state-church separation issues, provide legal assistance in cases of religious discrimination in employment or educational institutions, help atheists meet others who want to live their lives free of religion, and produce the Atheist Forum. For membership information, visit our website at atheistofflorida.com, where you'll find our newsletters, annual reports, statement of purpose, and information about meetings and events. That's atheistofflorida.com.
Our quote of the day from the second worst president in the history of the Republic, George W. Bush, who in Los Angeles, California in the year 2000 said, quote, "One of the common denominators I have found is that expectations rise above that which is expected." Very well said.
Yes.
Why didn't I think of that? I could have been president. If I
You
was
could
at
have been president.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I was going to bring up about this bill, which is brand new. Nan, please, I hope she doesn't feel bad about not being aware of it, because I just found it on, I go through the bills every day to look for stuff that it relates to state church separation. And this is Senate Bill 926, and there is a House bill, but I did not write it down. And it is advocating for real sex education in all the schools.
Hmm.
And it is based on science, it's based on evidence, it's based on facts. And of course, it's just, it's everything I could think of to put in a bill that would actually provide adequate sex education in schools. And interestingly enough, and I did not take this approach, I tried to find out from the Pinellas County schools about this group, More to Life, which advocates for sexual purity. That's what they're teaching. And hopefully they will come on our show and defend their, or I guess I shouldn't say defend, but to promote their view of why they teach this way for sex education. And I lost my train of thought. But anyway, they wanted a bunch of money, but maybe I'll just go back and ask for the curriculum. And my other concern is who's monitoring these teachings to make sure they're not teaching religious views, because that's they have free reign over this thing. But the bill, Senate Bill 926, and I encourage everyone to look into this, it's just they have to offer facts. That's all it says, basically, is you're going to teach children facts. And they, give the usual out for people who don't want their children to know the facts.
Mhm.
And it's all based on medical evidence, medical peer-reviewed medical information. It says that it has to be medically accurate information, because we know that much of the information they give, especially about abortion, is not accurate information. And this group, More to Life, is also the same group that offers grief counseling for women who've had abortions and that kind of thing. They offer the pregnancy, problem pregnancy centers and stuff, where they try to get you away from having an abortion, even if that's in the best interest for you and the fetus. But this is a really interesting bill, and I doubt it will go anywhere. The other interesting thing that I found in here is that from the abstinence-only education people got $1.5 billion tax dollars to provide abstinence-only education.
They could have built 10 miles of the wall with that kind of money.
Yeah.
Dopes. All right, go ahead.
No, I just find that quite astounding. I had no idea they had accumulated. That was between fiscal year 1996-97 and 2009 and 10. They got $1.5 billion to teach Just Say No.
Amazing. So
amazing, because it's so ineffective.
Yeah, exactly.
This isn't really teaching anybody anything.
And what they've shown is that the highest rates of pregnancy among teens is in states that do abstinence-only education.
Bristol Palin demonstrated that conclusively and decisively, didn't she? She had 2 kids. Different rednecks.
Well, people tend to equate sexuality with moral behavior.
Yes.
And moreover, they tend to equate moral behavior as being connected with a religious scheme or outlook of some kind. And so it's very difficult to persuade people that in order to make good judgments about sexual behavior on the part of teens, adolescents, that they need to have facts, education in front of them. Because people don't like to deal with facts. They'd rather deal with their prejudices and their bigotry. And we see this happening all the time with a great many issues of probably far less consequence than sexual education. But I don't know what we can do about it, except each of us promoting a societal or a social response that is more in keeping with what would be reasonable.
But the foundation of that is in the Puritanism of religion.
That's right.
And the Western religions that infect our country. And make these bogus presumptions that people can be just told to just don't think about it, don't deal with it, ignore it, and everything will be fine. The other issue is, suppose two people get married, find they aren't sexually compatible. Apparently, according to religion, all couples are sexually compatible and are perfectly content to live the rest of their lives together. That it's not the real world that we live in, though.
Yeah.
Well, and most of the men who are advocating this, and because it is predominantly males in the legislature, that are serial monogamous. They're not, they dump one wife for the next one, like Newt Gingrich, who
Those are, get the trophy wife.
and even Trump has, he's on his 5 children by 3 wives, is it, or 4 wives, or whatever.
It is Trump.
And she was talking about the meaning of no. I was wondering if she was going to tell us something about how you deal with a person like Trump who simply assaults women,
has no respect for the
none whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, he's boasting about the fact that women would not resist his felonious assault of them because he's famous. It's time for women to, not only just spit in his face, but also have him prosecuted for that.
But one of the things that I to change the subject slightly, this concept of teaching consent, that either person has the right to say yes or no, whether they're male or female, or two same-sex couples, or a same-sex couple, whatever. It's important that it's interesting because coming over, Jim and I were talking about sex education, and he went to Catholic school, and they went in and told the young girls how they were supposed to behave.
Aye.
And my first response was, yeah, because men aren't held responsible for their behavior. It's up to the female to set the limits and the bounds, and to say no or yes or whatever, no matter what, because the men have no responsibility in this. And this is something that boys need to understand, is that they're just as responsible. It's not just up to the girls. Boys will be boys, is the way it was put in my family. And it's up to the girl to say, to take control and to be the mature one and to set the limits and the bounds and all of that. And if you didn't, you were just a floozy.
But we're not responsible because we're out of control. We can't help ourselves.
Right.
We have urges and needs.
Yes.
And how can you possibly
exactly.
deprive us of that?
And the whole concept of consent, I think, is something that if it is taught in the and I don't know how if they handle it all, the abstinence group, it'd be extremely important for it to be talked about in this day and age, that it is up to that both people have to know that they have to give consent before any relationship, sexual or even really otherwise.
And as she was implying throughout her talk there, Nan, I mean, the notion of consent carries through to a lot of other different areas of life. I mean, we live in a society where you can subscribe to a magazine, for instance, and without giving your consent, they will renew it for you.
Yes.
As a convenience.
Yes,
you
exactly.
Yes, and that's just part of a continuum on a spectrum of non-consent, of not asking permission, of people behaving intrusively in so many other spheres of life that I think it's worthy of a great national conversation, and not just about sex, but perhaps beginning with sex,
Yeah.
extending into many other.
Well, I know, because having you say that reminds me that when I was a student and was involved in student activities, we wanted negative checkoff because we knew that people would not bother to check off that they didn't want money going to our organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of taking advantage of consent.
Yes, it is. And unless you're on the Starship Enterprise, why it just won't do you any good at all. Commander Chekhov?
Oh, checkoff.
Who is bad.
We almost made it, Judy.
Almost.
Okay.
Almost.
We only got about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, lucky me, lucky you.
We're going to talk more about some of the bills in the legislature that are
Yes.
coming up. And on our program next week, we'll have somebody from the ACLU joining us,
Yes.
probably in studio. It's a repetitive occurrence every year that the conservatives are always trying to exercise control and override our consent to how we need to live and how we need to buckle to the mandates of religions that, in our opinion, are simply obsolete. They don't really give us the kind of answers we need to how to live a better life, a more fulfilling life anymore. Never did, really, but it sure seemed that way.
As you say, Ed, it's every year, chip and nibble, chip and nibble,
Exactly.
Yes.
And
until there's nothing left.
right. And that's what Project Blitz is all about. We've
Yes.
talked about many times on this program, the idea of working in this notion that everybody should be a Christian in America to be the best citizen they can be. All nonsense. Fortunately, the younger generation, I think, is rejecting it at a really staggering rate.
Mhm.
Like a third of those under 30 are rejecting religion and able to think for themselves, and that's really a great thing, we think. So we want to encourage them as much as we can.
Remember, our founding fathers were not Christians.
That's right, Diaz, and of course,
Mhm.
the whole foundation of the First Amendment was the fact that the government will not be established as a theocracy and won't impose religion on us. And we want to repeat
Mhm.
that message every week if we need to. So we got to
Yeah.
wrap it up for now. I want to thank again our guest, Nan Morgan from Planned Parenthood, 1-800-230-PLAN if you want to reach him. Don't forget Tom O'Brien at 4:00. And I hope you'll be with us next week. We talk with ACLU to look at those bills. And continue to monitor state church separation issues here in Florida, here on the Atheist Forum. So now, along with Judy Adkins and Jim Peterson, I'm Ed Golly, reminding you, if the story seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because somebody wrote it down.
Make them prove it.
You have been listening to the Atheist Forum. To learn more about Atheists of Florida, visit our website at atheistofflorida.com.